Were you alive in 1999? And if you were, do you remember everything that happened that year? If you answered no to either of those questions, worry not. Here are some highlights. And as per tradition, 1999 started with January. According to conventional wisdom, the key to a successful video is to start with something big and exciting to hook your audience. So imagine my delight when one of the first big items of 1999 turned out to be about the logistics of creating a new currency. Please, bear with me. There's a story about Furbies and the US National Security Agency coming up later. But yes, at the stroke of midnight on January the 1st, the euro was introduced to Europe. At the time, it was only a non-physical currency. Travelers' checks, bank transfers, electronic payments, but no actual cash. 11 currencies, including the franc, the lira, the peseta, and the mark, were locked together in fixed exchange rates, awaiting the launch of coins and notes 3 years later. Moving on to January 3rd, NASA launched the Mars Polar Lander to study the climate of the big red planet's south pole. It was due to land almost a year later, in December, so stay tuned. Also on January 3rd, we have a cult doing something weird. Told you things would pick up. The Concerned Christians, a group founded in Colorado in the 1980s, were at something of an impasse. Their leader, Monte Kim Miller, had predicted a city-ending earthquake in 1998 which, spoiler alert, had not taken place. So they were in that awkward moment for any cult when it becomes apparent that their great leader is spouting absolute nonsense. The Concerned Christians did what any of us would have done in that situation. Admitted they were wrong, apologized to their loved ones, and started rebuilding their lives. Only kidding, they moved to Israel to await the second coming of Christ at the turn of the millennium, and in an effort to speed things up, planned a bunch of, and I quote, extreme acts of violence, which would lead to their deaths on the streets of Jerusalem, and somehow hurry along the long-awaited return of Jesus Christ. Before they could do anything of the sort, though, the police got wind of their plans and they were promptly deported. January 1999 also brought the start of Bill Clinton's impeachment trial, the debut of The Sopranos and of Family Guy, and the birth of England footballer Declan Rice. February. In February, the world mourned the death of King Hussein of Jordan after nearly 5 decades on the throne. He had stabilised Jordan, prioritised education and healthcare, and played a key role in Middle East peace talks throughout his reign. At one of the largest state funerals of modern times, dignitaries gathered to pay their respects, including Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Nelson Mandela, and Boris Yeltsin. Elsewhere, tensions in the Balkans continued to rise. NATO issued warnings to Yugoslavia, while peace talks at Rambouillet looking to end the violence in Kosovo fell apart. There was some better news for Bill Clinton at home, though, as he was acquitted of perjury and obstructions. He was the first US president to face impeachment since 1868, but carried on to finish his term. The trial left its mark on American politics. In post-election polls the following year, many voters said the main reason they chose Republican candidate George W. Bush over Al Gore was his moral character, not his intelligence. After the Clinton years, it seemed people were ready for a clean slate. Next, France. If you've ever been lucky, aka moneyed enough to buy a bottle of Châteauneuf-du-Pape red wine, you might find this interesting. On February 9th, the mayor of Châteauneuf-du-Pape proved his dedication to this cause by reaffirming a decades-old bylaw forbidding flying saucers or similar craft from landing in the vineyards. The ban worked, as no flying saucers have landed there since. By this point in the year, the news cycles were just getting warmed up with mentions of Y2K. For years, IT nerds had been warning that when the clock struck midnight at the end of 1999, every computer on Earth would implode. A coding glitch would make computers think 00 meant the year 1900, not the year 2000. Already by this stage, there had been years of preparation by governments and businesses. But now, with just months to go, news anchors started asking, would it be enough? Or would we be plunged back into the dark ages at the end of the year? Scary reporting on the problem started early and ran throughout 1999. February was especially scary as Peach Bottom Nuclear Power Plant in Pennsylvania fluffed their Y2K practice run and triggered a 7-hour nuclear emergency blackout. Not the end of the world, but just a little taste. Now, if it was the end of the world, you might have felt a little better if you had your paws on one of these. This is The Book, a doorstep-sized tome published by Hungry Minds, who have sponsored this video. It's huge, it's lavishly illustrated, and it is packed with information. All the information you'd need to rebuild civilization if it did, for example, succumb to Y2 chaos. Like, for example, this bit on how to make the most vital tool of all, duct tape, or this guide to making wine. I'm sure in the apocalypse we'd all need a drink. I'd suggest this if you love books, because it's a really nice, hefty, beautifully illustrated book. The pages feel very crisp and premium, and the artwork is delightful, with a whole lot of Easter eggs hidden throughout. Likewise, if you enjoy learning how things work, this is perfect. It's a lot of fun just to browse through, and you learn something new each time you open it. If it sounds interesting to you, or you know someone who this would be the perfect gift for, you can get a copy by scanning this QR code or following the link in the description below. Use the code Fascinating10 for an extra 10% off. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. March. 1999 can be seen as a bit of a bridge between the 20th and 21st centuries, and perhaps the next two stories highlight that. First this month we have the Melissa virus, the world's first widely destructive self-propagating email-borne macro-computer virus. It spread through Microsoft Word and infiltrated users' address books. Melissa was pretty bad, but its proliferation introduced the world to the concept of cybersecurity. While millions got used to this frightening modern world, Swiss psychiatrist Bertrand Piccard and British co-pilot Brian Jones committed to something a little more old-fashioned. They completed the first non-stop balloon flight around the world, presumably while wearing top hats and smoking pipes. It took them 20 days. Imagine the chaotic email inboxes they came back to. Also whimsical, the first Legoland outside of Europe opened in California. In much bleaker news, this month NATO followed up warnings with actual airstrikes in Yugoslavia. Under Slobodan Milosevic, Yugoslavia had committed a number of war crimes, primarily the systematic murder of Kosovar Albanians. After numerous attempts at peace negotiations, NATO decided the only course of action left was military intervention, which began with airstrikes on the 24th of March. They would continue for over 2 months, killing more than 1,000 people. To this day, debate over whether the bombings were justified still rages on, and the bombed-out buildings in Belgrade remain untouched, a constant reminder of a dark period in the city's history. April. From one tragedy to another. April 1999 will forever be remembered for the Columbine High School massacre in Colorado. 13 students and teachers were killed and more than 20 wounded in what was then the deadliest school shooting in US history. At the time, it was a bolt from the blue, completely bizarre and unprecedented, something that nobody had ever seen before. In more positive news, Nunavut officially separated from the Northwest Territories, giving Canada a new territory and the Inuit people their own self-government. Home to around 85% Inuit, Nunavut, which literally means our land in Inuktitut, was the result of decades of negotiation. For the first time, the indigenous community had control of their own government and resources. A rare moment in human history where a new region was created through peaceful negotiation, and not blowing stuff up. May. We begin the month of May with a world-changing cultural event. For the first time ever, viewers were asked the timeless question, who lives in a pineapple under the sea? That's right. SpongeBob SquarePants made his debut with a sneak peek on Nickelodeon. It wasn't all laughter and anthropomorphic sea sponges in May though. Indian troops discovered Pakistani forces had crossed into Kashmir. What followed became known as the Kargil War, the first armed conflict between two nuclear powers in decades. The fighting lasted around 2 months before India regained control of Kargil. It acted as a timely reminder of how fragile peace was in the region. In football, Manchester United completed an historic treble, beating Bayern Munich in the Champions League final. United's 1990s dominance was built on last-minute goals, so much so that injury time was given the nickname Fergie time after their manager, Sir Alex Ferguson. True to form in this game, They came from behind with 2 goals in stoppage time to win 2-1, completing the Premier League, FA Cup and Champions League treble. A truly remarkable achievement. Now, a tenuous segue. On the subject of spectacular comebacks, on the 19th of May, Star Wars returned to our screens with The Phantom Menace. It broke box office records, introduced Darth Maul, and gave the world Jar Jar Binks. It was met with, let's say, mixed reviews, but it kept the fire burning, introducing the saga to a whole new generation. Later that year, I was forced to watch it twice at the cinema with my older brother, and hated every moment. Finally, restaurant chain Taco Bell announced it had purchased the famed symbol of peace and freedom, the Liberty Bell, and renamed it the Taco Liberty Bell. Americans were outraged. The company later admitted it was an April Fool's joke, although let's keep this story on the down low in case any modern marketing executives start getting ideas. June. We'll start back in Yugoslavia, where 78 days of NATO bombing finally came to an end on June 10th. President Slobodan Milosevic accepted peace terms, bringing the Kosovo War to a close. Did the peace justify the bombings? NATO called it a humanitarian success, but others weren't so sure. Meanwhile, in South Africa, Thabo Mbeki succeeded Nelson Mandela as president. It was the end of a remarkable chapter in South African history and the start of a much more complicated one. Following Mandela, after all, is about as easy as following the Beatles on stage. Meanwhile, on June 25th, 345 prisoners Shawshanked themselves out of São José dos Campos' Putim penitentiary. They dug a 60-metre tunnel under the walls, which police only discovered when a passing bus fell into it. More than 200 escapees were eventually recaptured, but over 100 simply vanished. We haven't checked to see if there was a sudden population surge in Zihuatanejo that year. June also saw the launch of Napster. If you're under 35, you might have no idea what that is, but it was wild. It was different, and it changed the music industry forever. This file-sharing platform allowed users to freely upload and download music for the first time. It was basically the Wild West. Every album ever made, available for free. The digital music revolution had begun. Also in June, The Matrix hit cinemas in the UK, having already been a massive success in America. My older brother once again made me see it twice, but I actually quite enjoyed this one. July. In July, millions of people around the world spent hours patiently attempting to explain what The Matrix was all about to their friends. Also in pop culture, the 3rd Harry Potter book was published and Woodstock 99 took place, with a mission to emulate the peace and love of the original Woodstock Music Festival of 1969. It was held in Rome. No, not that Rome. And resulted in at least 3 deaths due to disorderly crowds. Mission failed. Outside of culture, there was still plenty to talk about though, not least of which was some big space news. On the 31st, NASA ended the Lunar Prospector mission by deliberately crashing it into the moon in search of ice. They didn't find any, but it did give future conspiracy theorists one more thing to point at when claiming the moon landing was fake. On July 16th, tragedy struck when John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane crashed off the coast of Massachusetts, killing him, his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren. Kennedy, the son of former US President John F. Kennedy, had been flying to a family wedding. The crash shocked America, the end of yet another generation of the Kennedy dynasty that had gripped the country for decades. Meanwhile in France, Lance Armstrong won his first Tour de France after overcoming testicular cancer. At the time, it was hailed as one of the sport's greatest comeback stories, a symbol of hope and resilience against all the odds. One lone journalist, David Walsh of the Sunday Times, expressed suspicion at Armstrong's sudden rise, but he was roundly dismissed as a suspicious killjoy. Any suggestion that all wasn't what it appeared with cycling hero Lance Armstrong was generally met with a disbelieving, "Yeah, right, and frogs might fly." In other news, on the 11th, scientists in India discovered a species of flying frog that could glide up to 12 meters between trees. Officially called Rhacophorus lateralis, it used its webbed feet as parachutes. August. August 1999 was a month of darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Let's go literal first. On August 11th, people across Europe and parts of Asia witnessed a total solar eclipse, the last of the millennium. Millions watched as day briefly turned to night, with crowds gathering from Cornwall to Constantinople. Some saw it as a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle. Others, naturally, thought it was the end of the world. It wasn't, but it did make for some impressive front-page photos, and it was also probably the last time anyone used a cereal box as a DIY eclipse viewer. While the skies darkened, so too did the political situation in Russia. On August 9th, President Boris Yeltsin appointed a relatively unknown former KGB agent, Vladimir Putin, as his new prime minister, his fifth in less than 2 years. It seemed like just another routine reshuffle, but in hindsight, this was one of the most consequential job promotions in modern history. Meanwhile in Britain, August brought a story that dominated the tabloids for months. On the 20th, Norfolk farmer Tony Martin shot 2 intruders who had broken into his home. One of them, a 16-year-old boy, was killed. Martin was, controversially, convicted of murder, later reduced to manslaughter. The case divided the country. Was he defending his property or taking the law into his own hands? Tony ended up serving 3 years in prison, denied parole on the basis that it was believed he might pose a risk to other burglars who broke into his home. September. More big space news. On the 23rd, NASA lost contact with its Mars Climate Orbiter, a $125 million spacecraft that was supposed to study the Martian atmosphere. The reason? One engineering team used imperial units while another used metric. The mismatch caused the spacecraft to descend far too low and burn up in the atmosphere. It was, quite literally, a failure to convert. Elsewhere, it was announced that East Timor had voted overwhelmingly for independence from Indonesia, ending 24 years of occupation. The vote sparked violent reprisals by pro-Indonesian militias, and it took an international peacekeeping force to restore order. By the end of the year, East Timor stood as one of the newest nations on Earth. On the culture side of things, The West Wing premiered, and Lou Bega's Mambo No. 5, released earlier in the year, became a global hit. What a month. October. There's a lot to pack in for October 1999, so here goes. On the 5th, a train collision at Ladbroke Grove, West London, killed 31 people and injured more than 400 in one of the worst rail crashes in British history. Investigators later found that the driver had missed a red signal, and it prompted sweeping reforms across the entire rail network. For many commuters, the disaster was a grim symbol of a system stretched beyond capacity. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, yet another power shift. On October 12th, General Pervez Musharraf overthrew Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in a bloodless coup. It was Pakistan's 4th coup since independence, and it once again put the military at the centre of the country's politics, where, in many ways, it still remains. Also in October, the UN marked the birth of the 6 billionth human, symbolically represented by a baby boy in Sarajevo named Adnan Mevic. The milestone sparked celebration and anxiety in equal measure. We'd gone from 1 billion people to 6 in under 2 centuries, and the big question was whether the planet could keep up. We've added another 2 billion since then, and we're still somewhat asking that same question. That's all a bit serious, isn't it? In lighter-ish news, the US government banned Furbies from its intelligence agencies. Officials worried the chatty, fuzzy toys might secretly record and repeat classified conversations. So, with world leaders toppling and natural disasters raging all over the globe, the Pentagon was meanwhile laser-focused on confiscating cuddly toys. On the 15th of October, Fight Club was released in cinemas in the US. On the 16th of October, the ending of Fight Club was widely spoiled by pretty much everyone lucky enough to see it on opening night. Oh, and the then revolutionary found footage film The Blair Witch Project reached the UK this month too. Scary stuff. November. Gosh, October was heavy, wasn't it? Fortunately, November provided some lighter news. First up, Australia held a referendum about ditching the monarchy and becoming a republic. Most polls suggested that yes would win and they would select a president. But the way they would select a president became something of a stumbling block to the yes side. The opposition had a neat little slogan: "If you don't know, vote no." It rhymes, and so it worked wonders. 55% of voters decided to keep Queen Elizabeth II as their head of state. Also this month, 500 people in Philadelphia received jury summons for dates in the year 1900. This was an early symptom of the Y2K glitch, an ominous peek at things to come. As usual, America had other problems too. A shortage of resources resulted in pockets of violence throughout the country. The shortage was in Pokemon memorabilia. Burger King ran into issues first. Their kids' meal promotion was so popular that they ran out of toys. They were selling 3 times more kids' meals than usual, and just couldn't cope. Meanwhile, people were fighting over the trading cards, with one man even pulling a gun on another customer to get the cards. Shopkeepers took advantage of the shortage, with some charging $12 a pack, triple the recommended retail price. On November 30th, tens of thousands of protesters shut down the World Trade Organization's meeting in Seattle. The demonstrations, a melting pot of trade unions, environmentalists, students and anarchists, were united by one message: the global economy was working for corporations, not people. Police comforted protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets. Stores were smashed, and the opening day of talks was cancelled. The Battle of Seattle, as it came to be known, didn't just derail the WTO summit, it ignited a global movement against corporate power that would echo throughout the 2000s. To round off the month, here are the notable cultural releases: Toy Story 2 in cinemas, and Dr. Dre's album 2001. A little something for everyone there, I think you'll agree. December. Remember that Mars polar lander I mentioned back in January? Well, in December, it finally reached its destination, and just as it descended towards the Martian surface, all communication was lost forever. It probably crashed on impact, though I'm not entirely ruling out it being hijacked by little green men. Also in December, Jay-Z was involved in a stabbing incident. That is to say, he stabbed someone. Or did he? There was an argument with record producer Lance Rivera, who ended up stabbed. Jay-Z was put on trial for it in 2001, that's the year, not the aforementioned Dr. Dre album, and he pled guilty, serving 3 years probation. However, little twist here, in 2023, Rivera claimed that Jay-Z wasn't the person that stabbed him after all, and he was just protecting someone else. But as far as I can tell, no one cares enough to do any further digging, so let's just say Jay-Z did it and move on. The year finished with a resignation that shook the world. Out of nowhere, Boris Yeltsin announced he was quitting on live TV on New Year's Eve. He apologized to the Russian people, admitted his failings, and handed power to his chosen successor, Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. It came out of nowhere and surprised everyone, except perhaps Putin himself, who really seemed to take this sudden promotion in his stride. Then there was the final build-up to the new millennium and the fear of the Y2K bug. By this stage, billions had been spent on upgrade programs around the world, but there was still some fear that things could go wrong. Power plants would explode. Planes would fall out of the sky. Your alarm clock wouldn't know whether it was coming or going. There was fear and trepidation in the air as we approached the new year. 1999 had been a tumultuous and tragic and triumphant year. As the clock ticked towards midnight, the world held its breath. What would happen? Would everything be okay? Would civilization as we know it at the very moment of midnight implode?